the government has announced sanctions against 3 men who were responsible for the downing of MH17. Back in 2014, 38 Australians were amongst the 298 people who were killed when a Russian-made missile struck the Malaysian Airlines Flight. 2 of the men that are facing sanctions today were last year sentenced to life in prison by a District Court of The Hague for their role in the fatal downing of that flight. One of those men is a Russian national, the other is a Ukrainian separatist, but they were tried in absentia and remain at large. The third man was a commander of Russia's anti-aircraft missile brigade in 2014. He was responsible for the missile that was supplied that ultimately struck that flight. Now, the government says that in placing these sanctions, it's showing that it remains determined to ensure that those responsible for the loss of so many Australian lives are held to account.
And Noor, what is now happening at the site of the terminated Russian embassy?
Well, the Prime Minister says that he's confident that the government's decision to terminate a lease for a new Russian embassy site here in Canberra was made on sound legal footing. Last week, federal parliament rushed through laws stripping the Russian embassy of its lease for an empty block of land very close to Parliament House. The government argued that that decision was made on national security grounds over the intelligence risk that was posed by having a Russian embassy so close to Capitol Hill. The Russian embassy yesterday launched a High Court challenge against that. And of course, over the last 24 hours or so, many people would have seen those pictures of a lone Russian diplomat standing guard or squatting at that site. Every now and then, every so often, popping out of a demountable there at the site for a cigarette. The police here are unable to move him due to diplomatic immunity. Yesterday, the Prime Minister said or brushed off concerns about that, saying that one individual standing in the Canberra cold did not pose a threat. And today he was asked about the High Court challenge and said that the government stood firm in its decision to terminate that lease.
I'm very confident that it will be resolved appropriately and in accordance with Australian law. The legislation that was passed with support of the entire Parliament was passed unanimously through the House of Representatives and through the Senate, and we're very confident about our legal position.
And that was the Prime Minister speaking earlier today in Sydney. He was also asked about the unfolding situation in Russia. He did not comment on that specifically, but when he was asked about whether Australia should seize this moment to supply Russia with extra military aid, he reiterated Australia's support for Ukraine and once again called on Russia to withdraw.